So Venezuela just put out a statement saying that all 11 people we killed in this airstrike last week were civilians, which is not great, to say the least. And this follows a statement from U.S. Senator Jack Reed, who just yesterday, following a newly renamed War Department briefing, said, quote, "They have offered no positive identification that the boat was Venezuelan, nor that its crew were members of Tren de Aragua or any other cartel." Now, look, I'm biased. I tend to believe the United States over a statement put out by Nicolas Maduro or the government of Venezuela or any number of other governments around the world. But we got to clear this up, right? I understand there's sensitive intelligence that you can't share at the time of the strike, but we are all of a sudden at the point where it sounds like we might have just killed civilians on top of the already legal scrutiny of questioning it. Do we even have the justification to carry out this strike in the first place? Transparency here, I think, would go a long ways, and it's much needed right now. So diving into what we know, the Venezuelan Interior Minister, Diosdado Cabello, said on state television just yesterday, quote, or earlier today, quote, "They openly confessed to killing 11 people. We've done our investigations here in our country, and there are families of the disappeared who want their relatives back. And when we asked in the towns, none were from Tren de Aragua, none were drug traffickers. A murder has been committed against a group of civilians using lethal force." Again, not great. I really hope that's not true for a lot of reasons, but it's this type of thing that is framing the Venezuelan response right now, where Nicolas Maduro yesterday, alongside his defense minister, put out a statement saying, quote, "We're ready for an armed fight if it's necessary. Along all of the Venezuela coasts, from the border with Colombia to the east of the country, from north to south and east to west, we have a full preparation of official troops." Maduro, likely trying to stay in power, is kind of beating the war drum. And an issue right now, anytime we have two parties facing off and both of them are using this kind of aggressive language, it just increases the odds that continued military action is on the way. So we've got Venezuela saying, hey, United States, you just killed a bunch of our civilians. We are now deploying military forces to the coastline. And we've got some statements here from Secretary Hegseth talking about how, hey, President Trump has declared war on the cartels, and now the United States is going on the offense. I should mention this clip here. Secretary Hegseth, along with the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane, just had an unannounced visit. I think it was on Monday. Yeah, Monday, an unannounced official visit to Puerto Rico, where the United States just recently staged 10 F-35 stealth fighters to assist in the counter-narcotics operations in the Caribbean. And during the course of this trip, Hegseth actually took a helicopter out to the USS Iwo Jima, one of the ships out there off the coast, taking part in some of these counter-narcotics operations. But with that, let's play a quick clip here from Secretary Hegseth speaking aboard, I believe this is on board the Iwo Jima. Here we go.
Right here on a destroyer, in the middle of the Caribbean, your boss, President Trump, has declared war on the cartels. What is the mission? What's your mission?
Well, protect the homeland, protect the American people. Core national interests, the safety of the American people. Stop the killing, stop the poisoning of the American people. It's as simple as that. I mean, how long have drug cartels waged war on our communities, on our families, on our young people, on our streets? Violent cartels that made their way easily across the southern border under Joe Biden and his disastrous policy. So President Trump's locking the border down. He's done that, and we're going to continue to do that. And now we go on offense to make sure these cartels can't be funded, that they can't sustain what they're doing. And it doesn't mean we're fighting every cartel everywhere endlessly. That's not what we're doing. We're not trading one endless fight for another endless fight. It's the precise application of American power to send very clear signals that narco-terrorism will not be tolerated in our hemisphere. And if you want to traffic drugs that are headed for the United States, we're not doing it with kid gloves anymore.
So I feel like we blinked and all of a sudden we're talking about increased military action against Venezuela. Like, this was not really in the cards even just a couple weeks ago. Now we've got the Secretary of War. I'm going to trip up on that a lot, by the way. My entire life, for I think most people's lives who are watching this, everybody's life who's watching this, it's been the Department of Defense. I'm going to trip over that left and right. Don't read too much into that. It's just me not being able to keep things straight. I mix up the year that we're in until like usually May or June. So it's just kind of nature of the beast here. Now, the reason I said I think that was on the Iwo Jima was because that's where we saw the secretary fly onto, but then right away the host there mentioned a destroyer, of which the Iwo Jima is not. But either way, you can see how this fight continues to be framed in that certain manner, and it's worth diving into some more details we have coming out today in both CNN and the CNN and New York Times actually talking about some additional details. Before diving into that, though, quick kind of admin notes here. I'm back home. I was in New York City for the Sufan Center Global Summit on Terrorism and Political Violence. Just wrapped up yesterday. I was very fortunate to be able to take part in a panel talking with Adam Hadley, who runs Tech Against Terrorism. I think that's going to be released, the video. It's not right now. If it is, I'll share it so anybody can watch it that's interested. While there, got to touch base and met with the foreign minister for the Afghan National Resistance Front. Hope to have him on soon. Some really interesting updates as to what's happening specifically in the northern portion of Afghanistan. Also, as soon as I got home, jumped on a podcast this morning, In Good Faith with Philip DeFranco. It's coming out today. I'll link that in the description below. We talked foreign affairs, military, war, conflict, so Venezuela, Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, and more. Absolute honor to talk to Phil about some of those things. Check it out if interested. Now, shifting over to the reporting from CNN, and I do want to kind of back up a little bit to say that we are seeing this presented more and more in a partisan manner. CNN and New York Times generally tend to be left-leaning. We're seeing a lot of pushback from the left here in the United States and a lot of cheering on from the right. And I think, my personal opinion, what's missing is a lot of mutual dialogue around some of these real issues. It's a lot of either celebrating or blaming. I guess that's kind of how we do things now, unfortunately. But article just released on CNN where they say Defense Department officials briefing congressional staff on Tuesday about last week's U.S. military strike did not present conclusive evidence that the targets of the attack were members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, according to the senior Democratic member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. That is Senator Jack Reed, who I quoted a moment ago. He said, quote, they've offered no positive identification that the boat was Venezuelan, nor that its crew were members of Tren de Aragua or any other cartel. There is no evidence, none, that this strike was conducted in self-defense. That matters, because under both domestic and international law, the U.S. military simply does not have the authority to use lethal force against a civilian vessel unless acting in self-defense. A quick note on that civilian vessel, and we're going to get into some of the legal questions here in a minute. I'm saving it for the end because I know it's kind of a dry subject. But the question of was it a civilian vessel or not has not been proven. That's part of the challenge here. So we just have people saying, yes, it 100% was members of this criminal organization, but that information has not been made public. So what we're hearing a lot is, rather than calling it a terrorist vessel, a narco-trafficking vessel, until proven otherwise, other than just words, it's being viewed as a civilian vessel. That's where the terminology there is coming from. They say the briefers also acknowledged that they could not determine exactly where the targets were headed. This is important. Another one of the sources said the briefers disclosed that the boat turned around at one point after appearing to spot a military aircraft above that had been watching them. The briefers also said they did not have intelligence that the individuals were armed combatants or posed an imminent threat to U.S. forces. So they did not know where it was going. They turned around at one point, and they do not know if the people on board were armed or posed an imminent threat. Contrast that with a statement from Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell, who said, quote, representatives from the Department of War clearly relayed to congressional staff how the operation was within President Trump's and the Department of War's legal authority to carry out the strike. DOW representatives also presented information that proved the government knew exactly who the terrorists on the boat were, which foreign terrorist organization they were connected to, and where their final destination was. So we're getting into this like different reality type conversation, right? These are not minor details. We have the people coming out of that committee saying they told us they didn't know where they were going, that they don't know who they don't even know who they were necessarily. And then we have the Pentagon saying we know exactly who every one of them were. Like, those can't both be the same thing, right? These are very specific details to be so contradicted on. And the New York Times actually had an interesting article today talking about this as well, where they were getting more into the legal implications here, where they said while the White House has not provided a detailed legal rationale, it has put forward the outlines of a novel argument that using lethal military force was permissible under the laws of armed conflict to defend the country from drugs, because 100,000 Americans die annually from overdoses. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said people suspected of smuggling drugs towards the United States pose a, quote, immediate threat. Mr. Trump, in a letter to Congress, justified the attack as a matter of self-defense. And we're going to get into now the legality argument here, and a really interesting article that I wanted to share with you guys. What's been frustrating from my perspective is I don't think we've had good faith discussions on this. From everything that I can tell at this point, There has not been a legal justification laid out by the White House or the Department of War as to the legality of these strikes. What you are going to see in the comment section below, I'm certain of it, just because this is how all the videos have played out so far, is a justification or more of an emotional argument as to why it's about time we did something. These guys are bad. The cartels are bad. This is going to deter them. And look, I'm on board with all that. Cartels bad. I hope we stop the flow of drugs, even if it's just a little bit at this time. If they're, nobody's standing up for the cartel members, but that is a very different argument than the legal justification for carrying out a legal strike. And I think we're kind of talking past each other a lot of times. But really interesting article here. It's a little boring, but if you are interested in this stuff, it's worth checking out. All of these will be linked in the description below. This is put together by Marty Letterman in Just Security, titled "The Many Ways in Which the September 2nd Caribbean Strike Was Unlawful and the Grave Line the Military Had Crossed." And this is like an actual lawyer. So Letterman is a professor at Georgetown University Law Center. He served as, I'm not going to read all that, a bunch of law jobs in the U.S. government as Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, stuff like that. So he's versed in this kind of thing. This is his area. He's not some random guy making a YouTube video all of a sudden talking about the law of war. He says, while officials claimed the vessel was tied to drug trafficking, no evidence showed it carried drugs or posed an imminent threat, and the military could have interdicted it without lethal force. The strike lacked statutory authority, relied only on Article 2 powers, and likely violated the assassination ban, U.S. murder laws, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and international law prohibiting targeting civilians. Now, I think where a lot of the confusion lies here is people will say, hey, this is a foreign terror organization. Yes, designated by President Trump and the U.S. government not long ago. The FTO designation does not open up does not authorize the use of lethal force against any members of that organization. That's not a part of the FTO designation. It opens up a lot of things for intelligence gathering, a lot of financial mechanisms that we can put in play, legal mechanisms we can put in play. Just because a person is a member of an FTO, we do not have a blanket order to be able to kill them wherever they are. That's not a part of that. Another part here is that we are not currently engaged in an armed conflict with Trinidad or Venezuela. We're hearing a lot of statements about how we have declared war on cartels or a war on drugs. It's not an armed conflict. And you can argue whether or not, the cartels have done a lot of damage to the United States, no doubt. But to the rule of the law, those are not armed combatants in an armed conflict with the United States. That's where a lot of the legal arguments are stemming from. He says the most alarming aspect is not just legality, but precedent. The U.S. military deliberately killed civilians, crossing a line it has upheld for decades. DOD, well, he wrote this. I don't know if you knew, but it's the DOW now. The Department of War policy and training emphasize the principle of distinction, never targeting civilians except in direct participation of hostilities. And anybody that's watching that's been in a war zone before, deployed overseas, that's part of the deal. I mean, we dealt with this a lot, and it was frustrating in Afghanistan, where you would see someone that you were pretty sure was Taliban going out to lay an IED or maybe pick up an AK and start firing at you. But when they're just walking down the street, you can't just shoot the guy because, hey, he might be Taliban. Or, he's in an area where we've seen Taliban before. There were very, very limited exceptions to that. If you had a lot of intelligence to make sure that you actually saw this guy do this, or maybe very, very, very detailed patterns of life. But the distinction between civilians and combatants is something we have at least tried to adhere to for a long, long time. And the argument that the professor here makes, Professor Letterman, is that might be the biggest line that was just crossed, is that the U.S. military openly and intentionally killed people that are not designated as enemy combatants engaged in an armed conflict with the United States. So there's a lot here. This is messy top to bottom. My gut still says that we are likely to see an increase in military action, not boots on the ground, not special operations raids, I don't think, but probably some sort of standoff strikes, Tomahawks, maybe some Hellfires from Reaper drones overhead, going after not just cartels in the water in the Caribbean, but maybe going after some of their facilities inside of Venezuela itself. To me, that seems like the next logical step if we want to escalate this pressure. And from everything I'm seeing from U.S. government officials, escalating the pressure seems to be the route we're going. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.